Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Digital Foundry at New Ken's first Tech Talk Tuesday. What we hope will be an ongoing series where we will be discussing some of the upcoming events, technologies, services, and networking opportunities that will be available to you at Penn State's new Digital Foundry in New Kensington. If you're not familiar with us, we are a new initiative in Southwestern Pennsylvania region to bring digital and smart manufacturing technologies to our region that would be providing services, including workforce training, opportunities to have access to digital technologies and tools for demonstration projects, for kind of test driving and keeping the tires, de-risking technologies. And those will be things that will be available to local manufacturers, to our students, and also to those in the community who are looking to dip their toe in the water with digital and smart manufacturing. So I'm joined today by a couple of representatives from our technology partners. We have some fantastic founding technology partners who are bringing their latest and greatest in digital and smart tools to the Digital Foundry. They include Siemens, and I'll give you Mike Holtkamp a chance to introduce himself in a moment. Canary Labs, and we have Shawn here representing them. We also have other tech partners, ACD, Premier Automation, Ectobox, and who am I missing? Banner Engineering, who unfortunately could not participate with us today due to some business and personal conflicts that have come up. But we are thrilled to have Mike and Shawn here with us, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves before we launch into discussion. I would ask for the participants, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function on your screens to post those questions. And I think Corinne has let you know in the chat already that Q&A button is on your toolbar. So please post your questions as you think of them, and we'll get to them in the end. But let's go ahead and get started. So Mike, would you like to introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are and what you do for Siemens?
Yep. So thank you, Sherry, and thank you to all of our participants today. I'm excited to be part of this. Excited to be part of the Digital Foundry. And so I am Mike Holtkamp. I've been with Siemens, I guess, a little over 30 years. In a variety of different sales, marketing, technical functions within Siemens. Most recently, within the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, have been centered around automation, specifically factory automation and smart manufacturing. So that's what led us to the Digital Foundry. I work with customers literally of all sizes, everything from what we'd call sort of mom and pop shops, all the way up to huge multinational corporations, and helping them understand where they are today in their smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0 digitalization journey, to where they ultimately want to end up using a variety of tool sets. A lot of those now are available to Digital Foundry, tools that historically might have only been available to huge, multi-billion-dollar companies, are now available to just about anybody if they decide to become part of the Digital Foundry. So mechanical engineer by trade, which only explains why I'm doing all electrical engineering stuff. Excited to be part of this. And Sherry, thanks for including me.
Yep, and my name is Shawn Ebersole. I'm with Canary Labs. I've been with Canary going on about 8 years. And so what I do here is essentially a lot of different things. Primarily, I work with a lot of our partners throughout the globe. We're in over probably 65 countries, but here we're actually located really close to the foundry, and we work with a lot of different universities now as well, trying to educate them and give them the tools to learn more about Industry 4.0. But I work more with those universities and other industrial technology companies, training with our software, implementing, and just any way I can assist from that standpoint. But we are looking forward to the foundry, and we're just happy to be a part of it from the beginning here.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Shawn. So to get started, you've both mentioned Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing, digital manufacturing, and you can't go anywhere right now in technical literature and trade articles and online sites that have anything to do with manufacturing and not see those terms popping up over and over again. And in a nutshell, what we're talking about is kind of creating those digital tools along the thread all the way from the design of the product to product out the door, so that you have access to the right information, the right data, that you can analyze that to make the right decisions as quickly as possible. And if you do those things correctly, it's been shown to bring flexibility and efficiencies and quality improvements and just visibility into things that you wouldn't have had previously on your shop floor in your operations along that product life cycle. So we don't want to spend a lot of time today kind of redefining those terms of what is smart manufacturing, what is Industry 4.0, but we really want to talk today a little bit about what are the benefits and the challenges, where is it being used, and how do you get it sort of integrated into what you're doing, where do you start? So I would ask, and we'll start with you, Mike. First question is, as people look at this and hear all of this, all these terms flying around, it can seem kind of daunting or like a big challenge or something that's too costly to consider. But where would you recommend that an organization start to take their first step? Or maybe they've started, how do they continue to take the next step? So where would you recommend that you start?
So great question, and it's something we hear from customers all the time too. So we have a thing that we say a lot at Siemens. I don't think we invented this, but this is an adage that we use a lot, which is start small, think big, scale fast, and then kind of a little asterisk at the bottom that says fail cheaply and embrace failure. So if you start with a start small, that piece of it is really just find a few instances within your facility where you can start to apply this data. And I think one of the things that people kind of get hung up in is they see this as this huge initiative or digital transformation, and it becomes like an ISO 9000 quest where, we're trying to achieve this certification or this thing. And it doesn't work that way. It's really starting at something very small and understanding that process. And then when we say think big, that kind of plays into some of the cultural aspects. So how does the organization really function today? And in some cases, we ask our customers to do that first. I heard Vince that works there at the Foundry. He talks a lot about this concept of the secret factory, which I think is just fascinating, which is really all the things that go on in a factory that nobody really knows goes on. So they're not documented. They may be written on a sticky note somewhere on the side of somebody's computer monitor, but they're not really captured. So it's very difficult to want to get into any of these concepts that we talk about with digitalization without first understanding what happens today. So that's kind of the think big. So what would we do if we could transform an organization? And then the third piece is, the scale fast, which means that we don't want to create a bunch of one-off solutions. We want to be able to cut and paste things. So once we develop a solution, we want to be able to cut and paste that very quickly throughout the organization. And then the last piece is, the footnote that I say fail fast. One of the things I think companies struggle with is the notion of, failure is a bad thing. And of course, we all grew up with that, and failures can be expensive. But I like the concept of just failing quickly and failing cheaply and using those as learning experiences. It's very difficult for companies to embrace. So if you said, where do you start? Again, I would start to think around that mantra, like, what do understand our processes today? What do they look like? And then start to figure out where are some small, very small, individualized use cases that we can start to apply this, but with the idea being they're not one-offs. So when we apply these use cases, I can cut and paste that over and over again. And again, on the failure side, knowing that not every single one of these is going to work. They're not going to work. And the companies that are extremely successful are the ones that take those failures and turn those into learnings. And I would say that's probably true in just about every aspect of this. So that's kind of a mantra that we start with. And then we build a framework around that. Companies that kind of do that backwards are the ones that really get frustrated. They think, I'm going to flip a switch. I'm going to be Amazon tomorrow and digitalized. And they usually walk away spending a lot of money, and they're very dissatisfied. And that's what we don't want to have happen.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's great. I agree with you. Find a machine, a work cell, a process, and kind of say, what do I not know about it now that would help me to make better decisions? That's kind of that, hidden factory. Like, what don't you know about your processes that data could help you to understand? And then you go from there. So, Shawn, how about you?
Yeah.
What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, and like you said, Sherry, about the data side, that's really our main focus is on data, where we provide a data historian as our main tool. And so when we see companies trying to start out, of course, the first thing we're asking is, what kind of database are you using right now to store your existing data? And that could be, number one, they're brand new, they don't have anything yet. And that's the easiest way for us. We can come in fresh, with our database and start collecting data from, their PLCs or SCADA system, et cetera. But what we commonly run into is people have data, but they can't access it. It's been maybe archived off from previous system upgrades, and so they have no way to get to it. So that's where we kind of can at least guide them initially, bringing in a historian to help centralize all that data that's kind of floating out there and they can't make sense of it. But that's really what we want to make sure for them is, do you have data readily available? You can start to make some decisions and desired outcomes, achieving those outcomes from that data. If the answer is no, then we, like Mike said, we want to start getting them, in at least phase one is getting data readily available that they can learn from. And a lot of it is like they want to have machine learning, predictive analytics, all this stuff right away. But if you don't have the basics of getting that data, you're gonna stumble and fall before you're ready to walk. So I think this getting access to the data, getting a plan in place to be able to collect that data and have it basically centralized. That's what we do. We kind of are that gateway for the initial collecting and storing of the data. And once the data is there, then we can help them do with whatever they want to with it, send it to this other people in the organization. But it's really initially making sure that they have access to the data, and that really be the biggest thing we run into is that problem. So
yeah, and I think central core to the whole industry 4.0 is about data and data creating intelligence, and intelligence changing the way you do things.
Yeah.
And more data isn't always better data. I mean, you can have 4 million data points, but if you don't know what they're telling you, it doesn't really do you a lot of good. You're just taking up a lot of space for your data. So a lot of times it's also starting on backing up and really saying, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and which data is going to give us the visibility to solving that problem. So that's a really good lead into my next question for you guys. And we'll start with you, Shawn, this time. But there are a lot of businesses, large and small, who are already starting to take these steps and starting to see some successes and getting that visibility to help them drive decisions, create value in their organization. So can you tell us about an example of where you have seen a business kind of start to take those steps and capture real tangible business value as a result of it?
Yeah. I can think of a really good example, and we are in other industry verticals, manufacturing being one of our main focuses, but there's a lot of similarities across different industries when it comes to collecting data. In the oil and gas industry, we have a customer of ours in Plano, Texas. They're actually, what they do is they're taking existing oil wells that don't produce, and they're injecting CO2 in that well to stimulate it to get it to produce oil. And part of that process is they have very large compressors around the country that they're utilizing. And they came to us with a problem. Obviously, they had existing databases already in place, but the tools they had to even do simple trending, it was a struggle for them to be able to see what was going on. And they knew they really had a problem. They were really losing a lot of money because of the way these compressors were configured, but they couldn't pinpoint the issue. And And just by being able to do even a pilot project for them at one of their sites, where we could actually take the data, ingest it into our database for them, and then just give them even some of our more simple analytic tools. We just have, a live trending tool, for example. And they were able to put some calculations into our system, and they basically were able to find that issue right away. And what it was just a simple like power factor ratio setting on those compressors. It was mislabeled from the manufacturer. They were able to, once they were able to fix that, and the guy that was using our system, he was able to really run an equation just to show them how much energy they were losing, and then he converted that into the actual cost of the energy, and he was actually trending how much money they were losing on the Canary screen that he was showing his supervisors. And really, they were losing about $2 million a year just over a simple mistake that they had the data there, but they couldn't access it. So that's where we could come in and give them quick access to that data, help them solve that one problem. And they've been a happy customer of ours ever since. But that's one case where having the ability to gather that data from those remote sites, that's the beauty of Industry 4.0, just to be able to take that data off the edge and bring it in, centralize it, and solve a major problem very quick and easy.
Yeah, good example of power of the right data in the hands of the right people to make the right decisions, right? So Mike, how about you? Can you share some examples of companies who have done this and had it pay off for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I like that that thinking that Shawn has, really, which is capturing that data and making sense of it. That's always one of the challenges, I think, as you said, Sherry. More data is not always better data. So it's really figuring out what part of that data that we can actually do things with that achieve business goals. So I want to think of a couple examples. There's one in particular where we had a customer that was using a paint process. And it's kind of interesting. They had a winter mix and they had a summer mix. And it was really based on the humidity conditions outside. But it was essentially at one point in the year, they decided to flip a switch and say, we're going over to a summer mix for their paint process. And on occasion, you'd have a dry day in the summer, or you'd have a moist day in the winter. And this was down in Arkansas. So, anything could happen. And so what it ended up was creating a fair amount of scrap, because sometimes the solvent ratios would be a little bit different. And, somebody would look at their smartphone every day and they would almost know that they would have a poor paint outcome based on looking at the weather channel on their smartphone and say, well, you're probably not going to have great paint today because we've got a humid day here in the middle of the winter. So some very smart people, and again, the customer knows their process better than anybody, right? So we're not trying to change the way the customer does things. They know what they're doing better than anybody else. They just have some certain points. If they could connect certain dots, then they can do amazing things. So what they decided, one guy mentioned, if we could just get the data out of my cell phone, essentially from the weather channel, and plug it into the process, imagine the amazing things that could happen. And we all kind of scratched our heads and, but is that really possible? And as it turns out, it is. It is. You can pull the data from weather reporting sources and actually plug that into the process. And so scrap was reduced dramatically. So instead of having this winter mix and summer mix, we would just capture real-time humidity data, plug that into the process, and it would provide change, reducing scrap, reducing poor outcomes. And again, that seems like a very, very simple solution, but that's really, I think, where the benefit lies. I mean, we could talk about all kinds of things that automotives do, investing billions and billions of dollars in data and doing all kinds of cool things. But the majorities occur just like that, where somebody understands a process and they know that if they had a couple additional data points and could plug that into an equation somewhere, that they could get different outcomes. And where you have that, that's really the low-hanging fruit. That's where, if I was a business owner or a business leader, that's the low-hanging fruit that I would be looking for. When I see big piles of scrap outside the back of the shop, and I ask my operators where that comes from, and they gave me an answer that simple, that creates one of those, think small. Start small, think big, scale fast. That leads right into that. So that's just one example, Sherry.
Oh, that's a great example, Mike. And I think, again, it's just like what Shawn was sharing. It's It's that uncovering what you don't know is possible by
Yeah.
just studying the data. And obviously there's other pieces of technology that you need to get you to that data. You need the smart sensors of some sort. You need all of this to be connected. And that's what this digital thread and digital processes that we're talking about being able to set up and demonstrate at the Digital Foundry is, you have to be able to get the information and feed that information along to your database and use your database to create visualizations. We're all by nature visual, so putting something on a trend chart is going to be way more meaningful than handing somebody a big pile of spreadsheets, because all of a sudden you have that aha moment, like, oh, well, I'm looking at all the 1,000 data points and I didn't see that trend. So, and then it's starting to create eventually maybe a digital twin or something to be able to feed that back, like you're talking about, Mike, where you need to make those adjustments to your paint system. Now, how do you start to automate that? Where instead of somebody, you've got the data, you know what adjustments you need to make. Now, the next step is how do you start making those happen more automatically, right? So that's where you start to close the loop on that digital thread. So these are great examples. And my next question, so we know that technology, unfortunately, is often the easy part. That where you tend to get into problems is the people component or the change management, because just like you're saying, Mike, about you got to have people start thinking bigger, looking for the problems and being open-minded to what the solutions might be. So can you share, and we'll start with you, Mike, this time, any words of wisdom around how you improve your probability of success by how you manage that technical transition within your organization? What are some kind of key points that you need to be aware of?
That's a great question. And that's probably the most exciting part to me, because this is something that it really involves everything. It involves even the educational aspect. So we see this even as kids are coming through school, understanding how problems are solved, critical thinking, all of these things are skills that we want in the workers of the future. So the days of having an operator stand by a machine for 8 hours, working a shift, taking lunch, taking a couple breaks and going home, is probably over. We need critical thinkers, we need problem solvers, we need people that can digest data and make intelligent decisions based upon that. And that's really developing that cultural worker of the future. As it stands today, we have some customers that embrace this right out of the gate. And we have other customers that maybe just don't see the benefit right away. And I always come back to the fact is that there has to be a business case, right? So it's making neat looking screens and all that stuff. I mean, it looks cool, but there still has to be a business case. We have to provide some business benefit to the leadership of the company, or these things don't make sense. So sometimes there's the impetus to do it. As you said, we figured out there's a problem. We figured out there's opportunities. Our competition's doing things. Our customers are demanding things. But the culture, this big behemoth called culture, just isn't moving very quickly. And that's something that we struggle with. And if I could just share one maybe story where the cultural piece was just kind of a very interesting part of this. So OEE, which is overall equipment effectiveness, is looking at a machine and determining how effective or how productive that piece of equipment is over an 8-hour workday. So we have an expensive asset that sits out on the shop floor, and we want to determine how much of the time is that actually producing what we want it to produce in the time frame we want it to produce. So in one customer, we looked at the OEE of a piece of equipment, kind of just using charts and graphs and spreadsheets, and determined it was very low. It was also kind of the pinch point in the company. Everything had to go across that. So we decided to create a project around capturing the OEE automatically. Operators would go in, hit a downtime code and say, this is why it's down, this would be operational. Right out of the gate, the operators had a cultural pushback. They said, this is Big Brother looking at us. This is Big Brother, determining how effective we are on this piece of equipment, what we're doing. Immediately a pushback, but we stuck with it. And over time, we had these operators that came to us and said, you've given us 10 downtime codes. Could we have a few more? And again, this is a piece of this where it really involves this collaborative environment. So everybody working on the same team to accomplish this, even people that didn't historically work together, accountants working with engineers, working with sales and different. And so what are the downtime codes? Well, one of them was refixturing. And we said, well, why would you need refixturing? And he said, because we're supposed to machine these round shapes, except when they come to us, they're not round. They're eccentric. And so we're constantly doing refixturing. And so our OEE is driven down more than anything else by this constant process of refixturing this ring on this milling machine. And so what that did is that actually was a win for the operators. It was a win for the company because we determined earlier in the process where it would have been much simpler to fix. We were able to send up now concentric rings instead of eccentric rings onto this process where it was very easy to fix early in the process and very difficult to fix at that part of it. And I think once we overcame that cultural hurdle that this isn't Big Brother looking in on you. We're trying to help you become more effective and more efficient at your job. It's just one of those things that we kind of use this as a test case to say, let's learn how we as business leaders can roll these things out better. Let's learn how the operators can maybe provide a voice to the leadership when things aren't the way they want them to be and take this kind of Big Brother oversight out of it. So that's just one example. And again, we use this word collaborative a tremendous amount, probably the most overused word in the last 5 years. But in order to be successful from a cultural level, that collaborative piece just has to be built into the equation. We can't have engineering designing something and then just throwing it over the wall to manufacturing. And they say, "Ooh, I've never seen this before. Now I have to figure out how to build it." And they build it and then we throw it over to sales and say, "Now you have to go sell it." We want that to be collaborative. All those teams developing products collectively, developing things like twins, so that when we build it, we already know how we're going to manufacture it. And so, that whole piece of it has to be built into the culture. Not easy to build in from day one. But I can tell you, once teams start to be built and once it starts to happen, it's a very exciting thing. And companies typically embrace it once we can kind of break down those barriers.
Hey, great, Mike. Really good examples because I think it shows how both culture can become a stumbling block for advancing technology. But once you have the technology in there, the technology itself can actually help to build a stronger culture because you're giving people, again, that visibility, have the right conversations to maybe go after some problems that weren't explainable. But now you've got the data to say, hey, this is a real problem. We got to work together to figure it out. So I think it shows both sides of that, kind of how it can be a hurdle, but also how it can also really help your culture once you get past that hurdle. So how about you, Shawn? Do you have any examples to share around the cultural implementation?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and again from our side with data, the people component is very crucial. A lot of the projects we take on, we have our flow of how we're going to implement a project, but we have to have the buy-in from our customer. We have to have the right champion there that's going to spearhead it, because I see a lot of our projects we get done fast is because we have someone from the customer side that's there and accessible and gets us everything we need. So that whole people component versus change management, I mean, that just goes hand in hand. I can think of a couple different examples when we're going into a project where we are basically transitioning data from one system into the Canary database. That process can be very time consuming when we're working with customers. I can think of one customer on the West Coast. They had probably 2 million data points with 5 to 7 years of history. So that's a massive amount of data that we needed to transfer into Canary, along with some of the other things that we had to do alongside the project. So a project like that, if the right people aren't involved, could take a year or more. But we were able to get that main portion done in, I think it was like 4 months, because we had the right people there that could continually feed us the information we needed. And that there's a lot of different moving components when we're doing a data migration. So we need to make sure that we have all that history of data continually fed to us so that we can put it into our tool to migrate it. And then along with that too, there's when they want to actually start paralleling and visualizing that data, we have to have other people that are really good with feeding us how they want to visualize things, because we get data points coming in that make absolutely no sense to us. And funny enough, it doesn't make any sense to the actual customer either, because there's 10 different people that look at data 10 different ways. So we have to be able to understand their nomenclature of how they label their tags, for example. And so there's just a whole lot that could be held up if the right people that don't know a lot about their processes and data aren't involved. We've seen projects go very quick because the right people were involved, and then ones that didn't go so quick because they didn't have the right people involved. But yeah, I think just in terms of, what advice would I offer someone trying to improve, their technical transformation, from the data side is, make sure that you have the right database manager involved and, the right people who understand the data, and that makes the transition go a lot smoother.
Yeah. Thanks, Shawn. Yeah, I think Mike talked about the importance of getting that kind of bottoms up support all the way from the shop floor.
Exactly.
You mentioned having the right people involved, Shawn. I think I've seen from my experience of going through this transformations in larger organizations is you absolutely have to have the leadership buy-in before it gets off the ground at all. Or you end up with all of these different, as you said, you have different people who all have a different agenda, not necessarily that that's a bad thing. Their roles are different. What they need to see or how they look at a piece of information is different. But it's amazing how it greases the skids when the person at the top is saying, no, we are going to do this. And we are all going to figure out how to get on the same page. It doesn't make the process easier, but you absolutely have to have that top-down support if you're ever going to have any hope of bringing in the right people and getting that bottoms-up engagement. So I just want to emphasize that, having lived that experience a couple of times, that you need that leadership buy-in. So
if I
yeah,
could,
go ahead, Mike.
no, I just think that's an excellent point. It's the leadership setting the vision for what the outcome needs to be, and of course they don't know, they don't know the individual processes, they don't know what Joe does on second shift, but they understand the vision of where they need to get to. And what we see a lot, and this happens quite a bit, really in large organizations, we'll see what they name a digital transformation officer or something like that, but it's a non-empowered position. So that person creates a vision, but really has no P&L responsibility. And so what you have is a bunch of independent operating units that are still responsible for producing a profitable product. There's no special budgets created for digital transformation. It becomes just sort of a figurehead, and he's pushing against this kind of a movable object in terms of moving them where they want to go. So as you said, it needs to have empowered leadership support that says these are the visions, but also we're going to fund them. We're going to have high expectations for what comes out of those projects. As I mentioned before, we're going to accept a certain level of failure, but I'm going to continue to stay after that vision, because as I said, this is not a 6-month or a 12-month ISO 9000 certification process. This is really a transformational journey on where the company is going to go. And so, as you said, that leadership is vital. In smaller companies, it really is more a visionary leader or a visionary owner that says, this is where I see the market going. And we're talking a little bit about and what I would consider to be an end user. We see this with OEM accounts that are now transitioning their business models. They used to sell a piece of equipment. It would sit out there for 20 years. They wouldn't hear from that customer again until it needed spare parts. They're actually changing their business models to look almost like, like what they do with software as a service. They're selling a product, but they have an ongoing relationship with that piece of equipment, where they're continuing to gather data from that piece of equipment and helping the customer refine their process. And that's monetized, good for the OEM because they get to sell a piece of equipment that provides ongoing revenue for them, but also good for the customer because this isn't just a piece of equipment that sits out there. I still think when I look at the Tesla, the most amazing thing with that car is the car you buy on Monday 2 months from now is a different car because there's constantly firmware upgrades, software upgrades. And we never thought of cars that way. We thought of a car we put in the driveway and, trade it in 4 years. And that is applying in the industrial world as well. So I just want to mention, yeah, excellent points. And Shawn made some, fantastic observations there.
Okay, so my next question, as we talk about Industry 4.0 and technology is constantly evolving and changing, but as you look at what's available in your toolkit, either through your organization or through the things that you see transforming in the industry right now, what are you most excited about that could be really impactful, and particularly when you think in terms of small to medium manufacturers who are trying to figure this out? Like, what technologies do you look at over the next 5 years, let's say, and say, this could really be a game changer? Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, so really for me, if you took, let's say the view here on Earth versus the 30,000 foot view, let's say the view here on Earth, the most exciting thing to me is all around this IoT and edge space. So IoT just presents the opportunity to serve up data that we can start to create these things called apps. It's so funny in the consumer world. These are just expectations. I mentioned the weather before. I got up this morning and I wanted to know how to dress for the day. So I, went to my little weather app and I saw, okay, what's the weather? I need to know what I'm going to do today. So I go to my Outlook calendar and it tells me what I'm going to do today. So that's just the way our kind of everyday consumer lives are driven. The industrial world still is not really there yet. And so what I'm most excited about is if you could gather all these data sources and somebody like Shawn's organization makes sense of all those data sources and then start to create apps so that I could go to an app and I could look at my factory that's right now sitting in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and I could know exactly what's going on in that factory. I could walk through that factory in a virtual sense and see everything that's going on in there. I could see if there's any challenges, any problems. I could know what's shipping out the back door. I could look at raw material coming in the front door. And this is all going to come really from that kind of quick application of IoT type things. We look at the growth of data, and every time we predict what the growth of data is going to be, we're off by a factor of 2. It tends to grow twice as fast as what we thought it was going to grow at. And that's all that data. If you looked at it from a 30,000 foot view, the most exciting thing I think is this concept of digital twins, that we'll be able to build not just machines, a digital twin of a machine, but we can build a digital twin of an entire factory. So we can run that factory, we can stress test it, we can move equipment around, we can see what happens if we put 20 workers in that factory and what happens if we put 60 workers in that factory. What happens if we introduce physical automation like robots? Is there a payback there before we pour any concrete? And then after we build the factory, we can go back and inform that digital twin that we built with real data and continue to refine that model. And those tools used to be just crazy expensive. But I kind of look at it like the whole video gaming and everything else. The price point has just plummeted. I think I see now for Christmas, you can buy a 65-inch TV for about $400 somewhere. So we're seeing the same price evolution in terms of the software tools for things like digital twins. So you used the word very early on about de-risking. And these tools really take so much risk out of, I don't build an entire machine and then realize, it doesn't do exactly what I wanted it to do. I can build a digital twin of that machine, actually operate it with all the physics and all the, everything that's built into that machine and operate it before I actually have to create the risk of building the first one. So that's kind of the right around the corner piece. And that's kind of, sort of as businesses grow and really embrace all this, really the leading edge of Industry 4.0, that's kind of both pieces of it there.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. How about you, Shawn? What do you think's could be exciting game changers over the next few years?
Yeah, I think Mike really hit on it when he started talking about the IoT edge space, because that's really where we've been focusing a lot of our new products, a lot of our new technology. One of the big things for us has been, our ability to really work well with the MQTT protocol. developed a pretty efficient way to collect that data. We have a specialized MQTT collector. Then we have a publisher. We can publish data out of our historian to different brokers. We just see more and more folks. I think Mike had mentioned as well the cost of these IoT devices. Someone using an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi device out in the field, we can collect data right from that and send that up to a broker on the cloud to be able to have any system consume that data. So we've been very focused on centralizing that type of IoT data from all those new devices coming online. We're continuing to see really more and more of these devices are Linux based, and I think one of our new products coming out we're pretty excited about to be able to collect data directly on Linux devices, store that data on Linux devices, not just collect it. So a lot of things we're looking ahead at, and just seeing some of those needs really is all around getting data from very remote locations that we used to have someone go out and write all that data, write all those settings and write all the updates down and bring it back and manually enter it into the system. Well, that's going away, and we're just excited we have tools in place and more tools coming that'll be able to make that a seamless process.
Thanks. So we heard the term IoT a few times from both of you. So I just wanted to, for those who are just getting started on this journey, that's the Internet of Things, or IIoT is an industrial Internet of Things. And Mike used the example of how much it's just become part of our everyday life to have Internet of Things as in our personal life. I got my Apple Watch and it has sensors on there, and it's keeping track of how many steps I take a day, and everything from your heart rate. You can do your EKG, and then periodically I'll get a report that shows up. This has visuals like Shawn's talking about, or trend lines. Here's how you did last week. Here's how you did compared to the week before, and and it starts to give you again some visuals about what's happening, some data trends that you maybe didn't have before, and can help you make decisions about, okay, what am I going to do better next week? And it really can be incentivizing. So, we're so used to having this in our personal life where we are connected and getting information and then making decisions based on the Internet of Things, the information, the data, the trends, the things that we're seeing that are impacting decisions we make. Like Mike said, what are you going to wear that day? How many more steps am I going to need to take to hit my goals or beat my average from last week? So that's what we mean by the Internet of Things, is starting to take advantage of that. You've got sensors collecting data, you've got data coming off of your processes. Where is that going? And there's a lot of options now where you don't have to invest in a bunch of hardware in your own facility on premises, and it can be very secure. So how do we start to take advantage of that Internet of Things, that connectivity of data through machines, through humans, and through software that's giving you an analysis of what's happening there? So guys, this has been a great discussion. We're coming up on the end of our time, but before we see if there's any questions or anything we want to address from our listeners, I want to turn it around and give you guys a chance to throw a question or two back at me regarding the Digital Foundry.
Is that for us, Sherry?
What's that?
Is that for us to throw a question?
Yes.
Okay, so
for you
yeah,
guys to throw a question.
Exactly. Sorry. So yeah, I guess maybe one of the things that I think is exciting about the Digital Foundry is the doors that it opens for business. And so I guess I'd like to understand, let's say I was a business sitting in Pennsylvania somewhere or northern West Virginia, and I thought to myself, I'm excited about this concept of Industry 4.0. I feel my competitors kind of nipping at my heels. My customers continue to demand things that I'm not sure that I can give them. I have an aging workforce, bunch of baby boomers that are about ready to walk out the door, and I'm concerned that I'm not able to capture all that knowledge. It's, in their noggins right now, and I don't know where to start. I know I sort of have these issues, and I've even seen some of my competitors go away. I've even seen some of my competitors disappear because they haven't been able to make that transition. So I walk in the Digital Foundry. What does that process look like? What's that? You're here to help. So tell me what that help exactly looks like. How does that process flow?
So that's a good question, Mike. And it starts with typically, we come out and visit your location and talk about, like we talked about earlier, what are some of those problems that are keeping you up at night, or that if you could solve this, it would really help your business in a meaningful way. So it starts with that kind of, let's find that low-hanging fruit, as you said. What's the problem we can solve? By spending some time on your shop floor, looking at what you have to work with. If we identify a use case, as we call it, or a challenge you want to take on, then we would come in and do a little deeper dive with your team to make sure we're understanding kind of the current state. Bring that back and pull in our tech partners, you guys and the others I mentioned, and say, here's some ideas on how we think we might solve this. How could we set up to do what we're calling our demonstration projects, where we pull together the right technology to show a demonstration in the Digital Foundry once we're there, of how this technology might work, bring those manufacturers back in to take a look at it, ask questions, like I said, kind of kick the tires a little bit and see if they can better understand and de-risk, and then come up with a transition plan on if you wanted to take this to the next step and implement it in your operations. Here's what we would suggest. Here's some of the challenges you're going to face. And then we either hand it off to one of our tech partners to kind of run with it from there, from an implementation in plant kind of standpoint, or we continue to stay on as an advisor if that's needed. So it's really all about starting with what's the problem you want to solve. Is there technology out there that we can demonstrate how it might help you solve that problem? And then what would your plan be to take the next steps and actually implement it?
So again, if I was one of these small to medium-sized businesses, it sounds like you're sort of making resources available. Big companies take this for granted. But if I was a small to medium-sized company, you're basically my smart manufacturing team. You're a little bit of my R&D team. You're all those things that I don't have to pay an ongoing. I don't have to keep 20 people in a room somewhere that do all these things. I can kind of tap into that expertise that you have. And then also you have the ability to prove out some of these with your own kind of sandbox there at the foundry and kind of prove out how they work in a real life sense, if I understand, right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think there's an opportunity to, like Mike said, you don't have to have all the expertise in-house, but you might need a helping hand, some guidance. Let us help you map that out and make the connections to the right technology and the right people to make it happen. Because it can be hard to know where to start. So we can help you with doing some of that homework on where to start, and then providing some of the technical resources to figure out how you make it happen.
Sherry, I also had a question for you. So if I'm a manufacturer, and of course I'm coming to the foundry to learn more about, industrial 4.0 technologies and solutions, but also there's the side of it where, maybe, students can be educated. If I'm looking at my roadmap and I'm factoring in that, hey, I'm going to need more talent in this area of my company. Do you have a way to link students and companies together, like from a job perspective?
Yeah. So there's obviously, being part of a university, there's a big element of this that will be about two things. One is educating the current workforce, and we are going to have some great training programs, already have deployed some of those and are developing additional training that will be deployed next year. So there's a lot of things to help bring your current workforce along. There will be opportunities to recruit from people who have gone through that industry workforce training, but also for our traditional university students, they're going to be working hand in hand with us on these projects. So it's a great opportunity for them to learn and help solve real world problems and apply what they've been learning in their classrooms and their labs. And then that gives the students an incredible opportunity to engage on how this would work in the real world. And it gives the employers a great opportunity to work with those students, see them firsthand. We've already had a number of interns who've been supporting the startup of the Digital Foundry, and we intend to have kind of an ongoing supply of interns coming through the university who will be engaged in those programs. So I think it's a win-win from the standpoint of giving the students great learning experiences and opportunities, and giving the employers a firsthand look at talent for their next generation of workers. And we've been fortunate to get some recent grants that are going to help us lay the foundation for some of the tools and curriculum to offer some of that training. And it's going all the way down to reaching into high school level, where we have some elements that will be available for students starting in high school, whether they be on that path of going on to a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, or they're on a pathway where they're looking to step right into the workforce. We're going to have training at all of those levels. So we do have a question that came up in the chat that's a great transition from what we were just talking about. It says, do you have any ideas about how you might best translate this vision of the future to K through 12 educators and students? What entry points might you have imagined for K through 12 educators and students to make all of this accessible, understandable to them through the Digital Foundry? So as I said, we're starting to build some of that into the content that we are creating for training. We did host a STEM camp over the summer for elementary kids. That was really to give them a chance to get some exposure to robotics and problem solving in a very fun way. But I think we're going to be open to figuring out how we do more and more of that to be a resource to our educators, our students, and our community. But I'd love to open that question up to Mike and Shawn too. Like, what do you see as far as when and how you start to get kids involved at a young age to be thinking this way and planning for this future?
Yeah, I think of an example of a high school student that actually used a piece of our software. It's available to educators either at no cost or very low cost, piece of design software, and design a prosthetic limb for a returning veteran. And it's a wonderful story. I'd encourage you to go check it out. Using a lot of different things, again, problem solving, trying to create a lighter prosthetic, one that fit better. And it used a piece of software that we provided to educators. And I believe this young lady, she was on the Today Show. She was maybe in 11th or 12th grade and designed this prosthetic limb. And it's just an amazing story of the transformational nature of technology. So again, it's not just technology for technology's sake, it's technology to make people's lives better. And to think that that occurred with a high school student is just mind-boggling. And as you said, a lot of this gets pushed down even younger and younger. When I see my 2-year-old grandson pull out an iPad and can find the exact app he wants and can point right to it and open it and close it. We're seeing this go to younger and younger ages. And so it's important that we take that technical ability and marry it up with that critical thinking, problem solving piece at a very early age. And that's how we're going to have the technology leaders of the future. So, as you said, Sherry, I think the programs will continue to come. Part of the Digital Foundry isn't just to help manufacturers, it's to be transformational from a societal standpoint as well, to create really people that are digital natives and send them out into industry and really do exciting things, with the technology and data that's available to them.
Yeah, and education's pretty big with us here at Canary as well. We actually do a monthly technology symposium, and that at times involves even like local high school kids coming in, we've had them come in, share some of their STEM work. We're getting our software out into the universities. We do that at no cost, to let them have more of a true historian data analytics experience in what they're doing, inside their departments. We do internships as well. So we're always looking in our community to pull out young, talented minds to, maybe even give them an opportunity at Canary someday, but just to let them, work with some of our engineers and developers here. So, to us, education is exciting, getting that next generation ready. So anybody that has any students with any interesting things they want to talk about, they're always welcome at Canary as well.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Shawn and Mike, for your time today. I enjoyed talking to you. I always learn something when I talk to our tech partners, and I appreciate you giving up your time for this discussion. Hope this is one of many to come. We'll be talking on Tuesdays in the future to cover other topics, other things coming at the Digital Foundry. If you have ideas or things that you would like to see us discuss or dive into a little deeper, you can always reach out to us through our Digital Foundry social media, and maybe Corinne, you can post some links in the chat for that. I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, and I think that this last discussion and question was a great way to kind of end with just reiterating what our vision at the Digital Foundry is all about. And our vision is to improve lives and strengthen businesses through access to digital technologies. And there's much more to come. We're excited about our new building opening in April. Fingers crossed that schedule stays on track. And once we are in that space, we can't wait to see you all in person back there for a lot of exciting projects and activities. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks
Have
again.
a great day.
You too.
You too.
Bye.